everybody. We have the honor of having John McDonnell, MP, the People's Shadow Chancellor. I love that term. Very comradely. It's thanks to him that we're here tonight. So, John, thank you, welcome, and thank you very much for hosting. As most of you know, we're here for the official launch of a DVD that Kwaku spent, I'll say, years in thinking of and putting together. And it's about the Race Relations Act, which, when you go into Labour history, Labour had a lot to do with. Bristol bus boycott, Labour making a promise that if we come to power, we will enact a Race Relations Act. Because now we live with it and we think that's how it's always been. But until 1965, there was no Race Relations Act.
You have to remember that when my father came to this country in the 1950s, you could legally pay a black man and a white man working next to each other on the same factory bench doing the same job. You could legally pay the black man less. There's a consequence of campaigners, early campaigners in the 1950s, that you got race equality legislation which ended that.
To be frank, we lost some of the street politics connection between those representatives to a certain extent and what's happening on the ground. And I say that because when Bernie Grant was elected, to be honest, within his constituency, amongst right the way across the population there was an element of elation, because for the first time we had a black person coming right from the grassroots, absolutely courageous and unbowed.
I think that since the Second World War, which is my life basically, I have watched the United Kingdom shift. Not government so much. Politicians, I'm afraid, I don't have a lot of time for. They're often hypocritical. You certainly often can't trust them. That's not all of them, but a large measure of them. We've not been told the truth about a lot of, expenses, you name it, over the last decade. You've seen just, essentially, how potentially corrupt the political scene is. So the fact that governments have tried to shift the diversity of our community, I think, hasn't necessarily succeeded. But what has succeeded, I think, and why we should be proud of what we have, is that when you look at areas of the United Kingdom, let's take London. I've lived in London all my life. I think London is and the people who live in it, are quite remarkable. Because actually, cheek by jowl in London, there's every nation on earth is here. Every nation on earth and their languages are here, their foods are here, their cultures are here.
I don't know if you're aware of the campaign for justice for Sarah Reid. Sarah Reid died in prison in January, and part of that campaign. And what we know is that she was felled by a catalogue of failures by public sector authorities and institutions, which ultimately led to her death in prison in January in Holloway. And I am very clear that part of the key reason for those failures, one, obviously the institutional racism, and actually because of her gender as well, where she was impacted. But the impact of cuts and austerity have directly impacted on her and what happened to her and why she was found and ultimately paid. So the price of austerity effectively is somebody's life, and that can't be accepted.
I think I'm going to make a couple of comments, and we asked a couple of young people too, because as you notice, they're all adults, and the reason being that, and if by the DVD explains, but it's a history project.
Now, it was mentioned a few times in the documentary about stop and search. And so in Harry's Parliament, the one that I'm part of in particular, that was a problem that was raised. And it wasn't necessarily racial, but just generically police officers exploiting their power to stop and search young people.
And also strongly about some of these elected representatives who ought to know the law. They voted for this. This applies to them.
Outlines the rights of the person who's being searched, and also outlines the rights that the police officer has. And it also has details of where you can complain if a police officer has exploited their rights.
For me, one of the key issues now is the issue around heritage, multiple heritages, and how that is now impacting on how we see our community. Because it's not easy to distinguish people easily in terms of categories. And then when you look at the greatest increase in population is among people who have multiple heritages, whether it's African, Caribbean, Indian, European. And it's that mixture that in some sense is positive, but in other sense throws up with it quite specific challenges and difficulties for us as a society.
So we're not talking about our opinion, we're talking about the law, and some of them talk about upholding the law. This is the law. The 1976 Waste Relations Act was the law, and Margaret Thatcher absolutely ignored it. Some of us used it. I was one of those. Herman Lewis, a whole host of us. We got some progress. We got some progress using law. Now, I'm not suggesting the law is the only way that we can take things forward, but those of us who are minded to use the law should do so. There are other things that we need to do, empowering our young people, and sharing, and it does take a whole village to nurture a child. All of us should be supporting our young people.
And you're supposed to think that there's something wrong with you. But we were bold enough to say, I'm sorry, there's nothing wrong with us. We know what racism is. We might not always raise it, but we know it's there. And what the kids are going through, and we're so proud of you. Continue doing what you're doing.
Yes.
But it's what they were telling us about using the youth parliament, etc. It's important. Because as Linda is saying, the institutions are there.
It's not a matter of my opinion or your opinion. This stuff. They care about the law, let's use it against them. The 1976 Waste Relations Act was the law, and Margaret Thatcher absolutely ignored it.
And now, when people look back, they are astonished at the speed of the change, but at the time it seemed very slow.
The price of austerity, effectively, is somebody's life.
And I'm worried that race is dropping off the agenda.